Okay, welcome to 2025. It's our first podcast of the new year, and it's cold.
It's cold, and there's lots of snow in Chatham, which
I
is
know.
really unusual.
We were just talking about that too. Like we were saying, we're not totally used to having snow like on consecutive days, right? Like in Chatham, we're kind of lucky. Like even an hour away in London or anywhere there, they get a lot of snow, and then we kind of avoid that. Mm-hmm. So to have snow, we were kind of bumming about that, but because I'm not a snow guy. Are you?
No. It looks pretty. It's better than the ugly, dirty look of the lawns. Mm-hmm. But it's unusual for us.
Yeah. So obviously we had a good holidays, lots of family time, and just some break from work and stuff like that, and feeling refreshed, new goals, new things that we're trying out this year. So, keep an eye out for that. But one thing that we're going to continue doing is this podcast, because we've gotten really good feedback from people. And we really appreciate all of you who have said something about that, because we weren't sure how it was going to go. And but each passing episode, I think we're getting a little bit more comfortable talking. So thank you so much to everybody who said something. So the snow kind of leads us into the topic that we're talking about today, and that's selling a home in the winter.
Yeah, we get asked that question a lot. Is it okay to sell your home in the winter? So we thought we would look at some research and try and come up with an answer for you.
Mm-hmm. And the answer might be a little bit surprising to you by the end, because I know that it was for us. So let's take a look at some of the data specifically. And our office, Royal LePage Piper Realty, has done a really good job of pulling some of these stats, and we are going to be referencing those today. And so I hope that as we're talking about this, like the techie side of me afterwards can put these on the screen for people to see, like when I do all the post stuff. So hopefully I can figure that out, but so you can see what we're talking about. So if we look at the Chatham-Kent residential sales, so Chatham-Kent encompasses Chatham City, Wallaceburg, Dresden, you name it, everything in Chatham-Kent. There were 53 sales in December of 2024. So that was our last full month. And the average price point was $432,775. If we go back to some of the historically better months, or what people think are the better months to sell a house, let's say like the spring, like April, May, June. If you look at April, it spikes up to about 468,000. I think this is what that says. Mm-hmm. But in May, 437,000.
So not much more than the average house price in December.
Yeah.
So right now we're just really talking about the prices of houses. We're going to talk about some other stats too, but people often think that in the winter, they're not going to get as much for their home maybe as they would in the spring. So we're just looking at the stats, the data, and it really doesn't support that.
Yeah, like because even in June, it's 447,000. So that's on average an extra 15K from December. But if you look at January, 433,000. Or sorry, no, that's the previous year. That's the previous
Right.
December. So it's 392 in 2020, at the beginning of 2024. That seems to be the only outlier when you look at this graph, because everything else is in the ballpark. And then in February, 422, March, 442, which is one of the higher ones on the whole graph. And you're still in the winter time.
Right. Yeah.
So the citywide average for Chatham was 412,000 and change. So if you break that down, this pie graph, talk about this pie graph here.
So when you look at prices of homes sold, the majority of homes, and this stat usually doesn't change for us, the majority of homes that are sold in a month are between 300 and 500,000. Usually it's at least 50% or so that are sold at that price. Over 700, a smaller percentage. In December, it was actually 11%. Between 5 and 700,000, 16%. And then from 0 to 300,000, 23%.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good stat to look at because the average price points, they don't give you a deep dive into like what's actually selling. Because if you, for some reason in December, $3 million homes sold, whereas like not more than 2 ever sold in another month, that could bring up the average because there aren't as many sales. Yeah. So it's good to look at that. But if we look at sales volume and number of sales volume, I guess isn't as important. I won't talk about that too much, but number of sales, this is kind of where you notice some difference here. So in December of 2024, the number of sales was 53. The highest looks to be in August at 129. But when you go to January of 2024, it was 59, starts to climb in the spring and the summer. So that's where you see the biggest discrepancy about selling in the spring, summer versus the winter. It's not necessarily the actual dollar amount.
Right. And we also, if you look at the number of listings versus the number of sales, you're going to find in the winter there are far fewer listings also. So you don't have that huge discrepancy between how many homes are available and how many actually sell.
Mm-hmm. So I found it really interesting that when you look at the number of days on the market for Chatham-Kent, I should say. We pulled stuff from Chatham-Kent. In the traditional kind of winter months that we think of, December, January, February, in December 2024, average days on market for Chatham-Kent for a residential home was 54 days. January 2025, 55 days so far. So obviously the month is not over. That can change a little bit, but we just pulled it anyway. And so that's important to know because, well, when you're selling a house, you say, well, how quickly is it going to sell, etc. But what I found a little bit surprising is when I looked at in the same year, May, June, July, as the market, the temperature's starting to get better and the market seems to heat up a little bit. May, 42 days on the market. June, 40 days. July, 44. So this to me at least is surprising because historically what we've always thought is, well, selling a home in the winter sucks. Like, let's put it bluntly. Like people say, oh, it sucks to sell in the winter. Why would you ever sell in the winter? Sell in the spring when everybody else does. But if you were to put your home on the market in December and say that it's going to be 54 days versus May at 42 days, that's only a 12-day difference. Like that's not even 2 weeks on the market more. So if factors in your own life or the perfect house came up that you wanted to buy, etc., if you wanted to make a move in the wintertime, considering some of the dollar amounts that we talked about, and then considering the days on market for 2024 at least, again, that could change in 2025, we don't know, but it doesn't really seem like to me that there's a huge advantage to selling in the spring or the summer when you look at it that way.
Right. The data doesn't support that. the data would say, which is surprising to us, that there really is not a huge difference, which is interesting. So when people now say to us, should we sell in the winter? I think our response is, if it's a good time for you, it's not a bad time to sell in the winter. And one of the things that some of the advantages of selling in the winter are there are definitely less people looking for homes, but what we find is they are more serious buyers.
Yeah, that's right.
If you are out looking at homes when it's cold and snowy, chances are you are a serious buyer. So you might have less showings on your home if it's listed in the winter, but the quality of those showings usually goes up. So the serious buyer is looking no matter what the season.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, there's going to be less competition in terms of the saleability of your property. It's funny because when we talked about competition in 2021, 2022, it was buyer competition, right? Yeah. And that's probably, I bet you there's some people that are listening that are like, oh, he's talking about buyer competition, right? No, wrong. Because we're in a totally different market now, a lot of the conversations that we have with sellers are, what's your competition? What are the things that are on the market that you have to compete against, that you have to look better than? Why would somebody pick your house over, house A or house B over there? Why does somebody want yours? So when there's not a lot of competition for a property like yours, let's say you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom rancher in Chatham, and there are only 2 other ones on the market, it might be a good time to throw yours on the market because there's not nearly as much competition for you. And if you have something a little bit different than the other 2, you could look really good. Mm-hmm. However, when you're in the busier months, there might be more buyers, not necessarily more serious buyers as we just talked about, but more buyers in terms of quantity. But there could be 10 other ranchers on the market. Now, how do you stand out? Mm-hmm. You're really hoping that your house has some really unique qualities, some really great things about it, or the way that you stand out is with the price point. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose. So there's also some other little things that we put together a little list of qualities, I guess, that might be unnoticed on a house in the summer or spring versus the winter. So some of these things, like if it's colder and you have a well-insulated home, sometimes you can tell whether a home is going to be well-insulated in the winter because, you're not, it seems cozy. It can impress a buyer that's something that's really important to them. But even if you have newer equipment, like if you have a new furnace or a heat pump system, something that's highlighting efficiency during harsher weather, that can be like a standout feature that someone else might not really see in the summer because it's not as important at that time. But there are some homes that look really good in the snow too, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, sometimes the snow really sets off a house. And the other thing is if you have a fireplace, the winter's a perfect time to showcase.
Yeah, you got to show off the fireplace when it's the winter. Yeah.
But I think overall, people are always having to buy and sell homes. People get moved. They have life experiences happen. So when you decide that it's time to move, our suggestion is don't wait for a better market. If your circumstances are such that the winter is the time for you to sell because you want to get into something new by the spring, which is exactly what happens when you sell in the winter. You have to remember, if you have 54 days on market on average, if you put a house on the market right now and you could sell it by early, so we'd go through January, February, sell it by early March, most homes have a 30 to 60 day close. So you're still not moving in till April. So selling a house now, you still have the benefits of moving in the spring.
Yeah. So a big thing is not only when do you want to list, but when do you want to move?
Yes.
Because if you're in the spring, if you're in the summer, and let's say if you're selling in the summer when it's hot and the sun's out, what was the average days on market there? I just pulled that
40, yeah,
look for
44.
44. So that brings you into the fall, basically. And then if you have, a 60-day close, you're getting right near December again, and it's cold when you're moving.
Yeah.
So that's a really important factor that I think some people just, they don't realize, and myself included. Like, as we were preparing for this podcast, we were talking about some of the stuff, and my mom was like, well, what about when you move? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess.
Unfortunately,
I didn't even think of that. So I was like, that's a good point. So we should probably talk about that because I missed that one.
yeah, unfortunately, you don't go from the day you list a property to moving just within a month. That doesn't happen. Rarely. Rarely.
Yeah.
So you've got to give yourself a few months in between there.
Yeah. And I think really what it comes down to is we ask the question, is selling a home in the winter a good idea, or should you wait till another season? That was kind of the initial question that we wanted to talk about. As we started looking at stuff, talking about it, I don't know if it's a cop-out or not, but we said, we don't really know. Like, the stats would show you that there's a little bit of a difference. Nothing super significant. There are some months and stuff that have been a little bit of an outlier on a graph. But when it comes to days on market, stuff like that, it's not super crazy. So we just think that after looking at that stuff, we can't necessarily tell you one way or another that, yes, absolutely, this is the right thing to do, or this is the right thing to do, because we get that question a lot. Mm-hmm. Should I wait until the spring? And oftentimes what we say is it comes down to your personal situation, and like, what are some of the things that would be like like in someone's personal situation, what would be something that would dictate a move? Like,
well, I mean, there's lots of things. Obviously, if you have a family, then maybe kids going back to school. If you're going on vacations, like some people who are downsizing, they want to make sure that they get their move finished before they go away for the winter. There's lots of different things, and sometimes it's a requirement. Sometimes it's a health issue. So there's lots of different reasons, and really what it comes down to is put your house on the market when it's the best time for you, when it makes the most sense. We talk to some people who say, well, I'm really, really busy for these few months. Well, then maybe that's not a good time to put it on the market. Then wait. But it's the best time to put it on the market is when it works best for you. That's what we found.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't have said it any better myself. So overall, the answer that we have come to is the statistics don't necessarily make a huge difference from what we have looked at. And so if you're considering a move in the wintertime or listing a home in the winter, because like we said, a move and listing don't necessarily happen in the same season. It can happen if it's quick, but a lot of times it's not. So if you're considering listing your home in the winter, there's just some things that you have to talk through and know that the statistics aren't something that you really have to, shouldn't be the only thing that you consider. There's the personal situation. So before we go, do you have anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so. As we have had a great beginning to 2025, we're seeing lots of people who are listing their houses right now. So if you are ready to make a move, we'd love to chat with you. And it's never too early to sit down with your trusted realtor to talk about the situation. If you're looking at doing anything in 2025, then give us a call. Let's chat.
Perfect. Yeah, we'd love to chat with you. We really value the trust of our clients that have help or have allowed us to help with their transactions that they've gone through. So we never take that lightly, never take it for granted. So thank you so much to everybody who has supported us for 2024, all the years before that. And we know that 2025 is going to be remarkable too for everybody. And we hope that it is for you too. So we'll catch you on the next one. And until then, cheers.